Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. And today we are talking about one of my favorite topics in Star Wars, shipyards. And this is something you guys have always seemed interested in. You've really liked my videos on shipyards in the past. One example would be why shipyards generally were so difficult to capture, especially mid-war. With all that being said, if you want more content diving into this topic, for one, like this video, but for two, let me know if there are any questions you have down below. So there were obviously many shipyards throughout the Star Wars galaxy, some which would produce civilian vessels for widespread sale, some which would slowly churn out Imperial Star Destroyers, but there were also a handful of shipyards which, because of their productivity, the size of their productions, or their unique ship designs, achieved legendary status. Today we'll be looking at the 5 largest and most important shipyards in Star Wars history, and there's a couple of things that I think you guys will find interesting on this list. First of all, these shipyards are so massive that they typically encompass the entire industrial capacity of one planet and have also expanded into massive orbital facilities, sometimes shipbuilding rings, representing the massive scale of the projects which they undertake. You'll also notice that most of these shipyards became so large because they were the chief production engine for one of the major factions in Star Wars. Now, that wasn't always the case, but you'll also see that some of these shipyards would be highly contested and very valuable tools during wartime. Alright, a couple of rules. First of all, I'll be going with Star Wars Legends information. I'm not including anything like the Star Forge. If this were canon, I wouldn't include Exegol. I'm looking at traditional shipyard planets. I've also decided not to include the Dark Empire and Biss, because I'm looking for more of a continuity. You'll also notice that all these shipyards were relevant in the last 100 years of the timeline. That doesn't mean that the shipyards we're talking about today didn't exist into the history, however, there were no historic-only shipyards. On my short list were the Axum shipyards and the Foros shipyards. The former was relevant tens of thousands of years before the original trilogy, while the latter served the Old Republic, then later again during the Clone Wars, but they just didn't make the cut. Alright, at number 5 we have Corellia, one of the most famous planets in the Star Wars galaxy, birthplace of not only Han Solo, Wedge Antilles, and more, but also the Corellian Engineering Corporation, which, according to the Essential Guide to Warfare, was located in massive orbital facilities and dockyards above the planet Corellia. The Corellian Engineering Corporation was one of the largest starship manufacturers in the entire galaxy, and alongside some of the other shipyards we'll talk about later, was one of the few civilian shipyards capable of producing Dreadnought-class ships, i.e. Super Star Destroyers and similar vessels. Other subsidiary shipyards were also layered throughout the Corellian system, and as we learn in Legacy of the Force, even hidden in secret asteroid belts. Corellia was so powerful that it even maintained a degree of independence under the Empire, at least for a time, and during the Yuuzhan Vong War, would be one of the major producers of the New Republic's Star Defenders, their largest and most powerful vessels. Corellia was so powerful in that period and afterwards that it was even able to build its own dreadnoughts in secret and openly revolt against the Galactic Alliance. Alright, next up we have number 4, and I've gotta say, I knew pretty much immediately 4 of the shipyards that would be on the list, and this is the one that was sort of up in the air. I ended up going with Rothana, and specifically Rothana during the Clone Wars. Rothana was a very interesting planet. It was hidden in wild space and only accessible by secret hyperspace lanes. It was also guarded by a powerful fleet of starships. Rothana was established by Kuat drive yards. I wonder if they'll make the list. They purchased the secret location of the planet, and according to the Essential Guide to Warfare, they dispatched one of their best engineers with thousands of workers and a fleet of ships. This engineer would turn Rothana into a self-sufficient web of mining operations, factories, and shipyards, thus creating the Kuat drive yard subsidiary Rothana Heavy Engineering. You probably recognize that name because Rothana Heavy supplied a ton of the ships, vehicles, and equipment used by the Republic during the Clone Wars. The best testament to the sheer size of the Rothana shipyards would be their completion of what was known as Project Icefang. In 31 ABY, not even a decade before the Clone Wars, KDY was contacted and basically given an order for the entirety of the Republic's military, of course in secret. This is how the Republic had ready-made ships and everything else at the start of the Clone Wars. Why they never questioned this? well, who knows? Rothana successfully produced this military and throughout the Clone Wars continued to arm the Republic with ships, vehicles, and weapons. For some reason, Rothana fell somewhat out of use after the Clone Wars, which makes sense because from what I understand, its location was still pretty much a secret, but I'm guessing the Empire wanted to consolidate a lot of their power more coreward. Anyway, next up at number 3 we have Fondor, and I've gotta say, until basically 10 seconds ago, Fondor went in my number 2 spot. That spot instead is going to go to Mon Calamari, mostly because of the degree that the New Republic leaned on Mon Cala during its most productive years, but let's talk about Fondor first. I'm going to be kind of brief because I covered Fondor extensively in the video I mentioned earlier about how to capture shipyards, but this was a planet fully dedicated to industry. Not only did it have orbital shipbuilding facilities like Corellia and Kuat, but the entirety of the planet's surface was an industrial wasteland. During the Imperial era, Fondor was used to produce many of the Empire's largest projects, including the first Executor-class superstar destroyer, the Executor itself, or at least a large part of its construction. Later, during the Second Galactic Civil War, Fondor was the shipyard for the Confederacy, and just a reminder, the Confederacy also had Corellia and other major planets in its union. Fondor benefited not only from being fully industrialized, but also proximity to vast amounts of resources used in starship production. If you want to learn more about the planet, I really recommend Legacy of the Force Revelation, and again, check out the video I did before. I go into more details about the actual layout of the shipyards and more. Alright, at number 2 we have the Mon Calamari Shipyards, a shipyards with a long history, but which most prominently, of course, was responsible for much of the New Republic's military. We get a good look at the shipyards in Dark Apprentice, Book 2 of the Jedi Academy trilogy. That book really looks at how important Mon Cala and the shipyards were to the functioning of the New Republic. The planet is called the Soul of the Rebellion, but it was actually this quote, again from the Essential Guide to Warfare, which made me move this to number 2 on the list. After Endor, the Mon Calamari Shipyards doubled their production every year, taking advantage of massive New Republic funding. In some years, as much as 5% of the entire government budget was assigned to Mon Cal-led shipbuilding efforts. 5%, that is insane. Now, for sure, some of that definitely includes R&D and more, but 5% towards shipbuilding of the entire New Republic's budget is a lot. That's not 5% to warfare, that's 5% to just shipbuilding efforts. And I would have assumed that would have been one of the lesser expensive portions of running a military. Mon Calamari was renowned across the galaxy for its massive orbital ring, and of course the great designs which consistently came out of the Mon Cal shipyards. Mon Calamari suffered for helping the New Republic. The planet was devastated, well, by the World Devastators. It was attacked by Admiral Dalla, and were devastated during the Second Imperial Civil War. Alright, at number 1, to the surprise of nobody, we have Kuat Drive Yards. KDY was the largest shipbuilding corporation in the galaxy by far, and its shipbuilding facilities matched that. KDY was arguably the first shipyard in the galaxy to produce dreadnoughts, and it did so really to just prove the might of its manufacturing facilities. By the time of the Clone Wars, alongside Rothana, KDY was the starship manufacturer for the Republic. After Geonosis, it received an order for 1,000 acclimators, and by the time of the Empire, Kuat Drive Yards pretty much built the entirety of the Empire's navy. It was called the crown jewel of the Empire, and was usually protected by a fleet of hundreds of ships, including large battlecruisers and even Kuat-made dreadnoughts. Any other choice but KDY, I think, would have been very controversial at the number 1 spot. It's almost like a truism that Kuat is the largest shipbuilding planet in Star Wars. That's really all I've got for today, guys. If you want more details on any of these, especially Kuat, I think I could cover a lot more extensively in a dedicated video. Let me know all of that and more down below. Till next time though, guys, have a good one, be safe, and may the Force be with you.